Welcome to this Vitality Doctor Masterclass, 3 Essentials to Feel Youthful at Every Age. I want to start by really addressing the title. I have Youthful at Every Age, and I was listening to an interview with Helen Mirren recently, and the interviewer called her Youthful, and she said, "No, I'm not youthful, I'm not full of youth, I'm full of life." And I actually thought that was such a good description of what I want to talk about. So when I mention youthful, really what I'm talking about is being full of life. And when I think of that, I think of two words: longevity, a life full of years, and vitality, years full of life. And so today, what I want to do is I want to look at the science behind longevity and vitality and then share a very simple formula for getting started. But before we start, I would just be interested if you could score yourself on how you feel about getting older. So score 1 if you're dreading it, and a 5 if you're excited about it. And if it doesn't feature at all in anything that you do, just score 0. And if you want to share, please share. But we will be coming back to this later. I think I was probably approaching 50 when age first became a factor in my head. And honestly, there was lots of things happening, but it really felt like aging was something happening to me. And I didn't like the fact, I didn't even recognize myself, and I really didn't like that feeling. And it's not really surprising when you think about it, because as we approach 50, there are many changes, particularly in women. We've got hormonal changes, we've got accelerated aging at a cellular level, there are family dynamics changing, society's values change, and maybe you have experienced or are experiencing one or more of the following changes: physical changes like fatigue, sleeplessness, or your waistband increasing seemingly all by itself; mental changes like feeling like you've lost your mental edge or being forgetful; emotional changes like feeling anxious or not like yourself. And maybe there are circumstantial changes where you sort of not even sure of your identity anymore, maybe a change in your working circumstances, or the children have left home and your role has changed. Maybe you just don't feel valued by society anymore. And it would be really easy with all of those changes, those challenges, to feel like it's all downhill from here. But there's another change, which I think is the exciting one. And it's when women of a certain age, let's say 50 plus or minus, say, "I'm not done yet. I have hopes and dreams and plans. I refuse to be told how to look and feel and act because of my age." Yes, youth is great, but so is experience, and you can't fast track your way there. I choose age, to claim age as my superpower. I choose to defy age limits. Put a yes in the comments if you choose to defy age limits and claim age as a superpower. So if we're going to defy age limits, how do we do that from a biological point of view? Well, we need to uncouple our biological age from our chronological age. We're going to reset it, if you like. So you might have heard people saying, "Oh, she's 80, but she's got the energy of a 40-year-old." That's an example of what uncoupling your chronological age from your biological age looks like. Your chronological age determines the candles on your cake. It's determined by when you were born. But it's your biological age that determines how you look and feel. And they don't have to match. You can reset your biological age. So how do we affect our biological age? Well, biological age is determined by how healthy and efficient our cells are. And when we have healthy, efficiently operating cells, that's when we have a glow on our skin and spring in our step, and we feel mentally sharp. So how do we affect our cells? Well, we activate the cellular rejuvenation mechanisms. And it's not as complicated as it sounds. And cellular rejuvenation is not just about looking younger and living longer. It's about freedom from limitations, from fatigue, from aches, from worries about aging. Cellular rejuvenation is not vanity. It's about being the best version of yourself because you deserve that. The world deserves that. I mean, the world needs that. Taking control of your health at a cellular level is how you achieve longevity and vitality for decades to come. So there was a study from Stanford that actually looked at the changes in the cells around aging, and they found that there were two ages in men and women where there was accelerated aging, 44 and 60. But you can mitigate those changes by changing behavior. So what behaviors do you change? Well, you introduce behaviors that activate cellular rejuvenation. You introduce behaviors that reprogram the cells to act at a more healthy and efficient state, in a more healthy and efficient state. And you may have heard these behaviors called biohacks or protocols or healthy habits. I like to call them vitality codes because at the end of the day, we're reprogramming the cells. But whatever you call them isn't as important as the fact that you actually activate them. Maybe you've looked at this area before, and perhaps you were so overwhelmed by the information that you didn't even get started because, let's face it, the literature around longevity is vast. Maybe you started and then got confused about what to do next, or you jumped from one thing to another. You sort of got that FOMO, didn't want to miss out, so you were jumping from one best thing to the next best thing. And you just went around in circles. Or maybe you heard somebody speaking about it, but you really didn't identify with them. You thought, well, that's not for me. Well, cellular rejuvenation is something everyone can access. And today I want to demystify the science around it so you can see that it doesn't need to be difficult. Gives you some clarity on what you can do and hopefully empower you to start your journey today. So my name's Maud, and I live in New Zealand, and after over 40 years in medicine, I'm transitioning into a role as a healthy aging strategist, really helping women who are feeling overwhelmed by the challenges that they're facing take control of their health at a cellular level so they can have longevity and vitality. They can love the life they're in. They can fall in love with getting older. I'm 67 and I'm not done yet. I have hopes and dreams. I want to be fit, active, and healthy for decades to come so I can do the things that I love, like biking the hills with my husband and dancing around my living room and creating new things. And when somebody says it's all downhill from here, I just imagine myself on my bike coming down the hills, freewheeling with the wind in my face, and it's exhilarating. It's not depressing. But it wasn't always like that. Up until the age of 48, I was busy being busy. I was on a hamster wheel, if you like. I was in very high-powered jobs, very stressful hospital environments, very long hours. I didn't have any self-care practices. I wasn't thinking about the future or my future health. I was really taking things for granted. And then my stepson died, and he was 24, he was in an accident. And I remember at the funeral thinking, I don't think the sun's ever going to shine as bright as it did before. The trees are going to have leaves that are so green, or the sky is going to ever be so blue. It felt like the shine had gone off everything. And it was just a very difficult time after that. And then on top of that, I started having, I was in perimenopause, so I started having physical changes as well. And I really felt out of control. Like I didn't feel like me. I'd been somebody who was, it was, I had to really work hard to maintain my weight. And then suddenly my weight was just, going up with me doing nothing, as well as some other things. So I felt really out of control. And between then and now, there's where I am now, where I feel in love with my life, from that place of feeling sort of a bit hopeless and helpless and out of control to now loving my life. There have been a number of things that have happened. And some key ones was I was driving, and you might have heard this story before, but I was driving and I was on an elevated motorway. It was winter, and in Christchurch, there was an elevated motorway, and it was a sunny day, and in the distance I could see the mountains, and the snow was glistening with the sun, and the sky didn't have cloud in it. It was beautiful blue. And I remember just having this, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. And right in that moment, I felt the happiness and the joy. And I was like, oh, even though my external circumstances are quite sad, I can feel joy. And that was quite empowering because it sort of gave me a sense of control. And then I read a book called The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. And I realized when I read that, it's like, oh, we can program ourselves. We can program ourselves. We can dictate our physical state. So now I've taken control of my internal state. Now I can sort out my physical state. So now I'm on a roll. Like I'm right in the driving seat again. And, I was like, no, this is where I'm going. I'm sorting this out. I'm working it out. I'm being in control of this. And I started, reading energy medicine, longevity. I certified in some practices that would be considered alternative from the medical point of view, like hypnotherapy, in a somatic practice, quantum flow, and most recently in quantum breath. And I remember quantum breath. When I started the search, it would have been easy to be overwhelmed by the information. But luckily, I had my background in evidence-based practice to draw on. So I sort of knew how to navigate the literature, how to ask questions and get the answers that I needed, to get the answers that I wanted, to ask the questions, get the answers that I wanted. I then knew how to analyze the data that was coming and see, is this information that's useful to me or not? Is this something that I need to be aware of or take notice of? And so over a period of time, I broke, everything. So I just broke everything down into, I like to think things to be simple and easy. And I took all of the stuff and I made simple little systems. And I don't know if there's any time that you have wanted to do the right thing, but then just been overwhelmed by the information and actually did nothing. I mean, what would it be like to have a step-by-step guide, science-backed, of things to do for healthy aging? I mean, that's something that I wish I'd had 17 years ago. And that's what I've created with my online course, which is Vibrant Age Revolution, which is really a step-by-step guide to help people get started and get onto that pathway to falling in love with getting older. And, it's particularly designed for busy women who want maximum results without having to do all the research themselves. And for a while, it was that information was just packaged it was just information. But I realized that when I did the breath work, that combining them really could make a transformative program. And that's when I decided really to bring it. That's why I decided to bring it to the world in an online course. And so because it's one thing to know about cellular rejuvenation, but it's another thing to experience it. So let's go back to learning a little bit more about it now. So when I learn things, I like to always have 3 take-home messages. So today I've broken the talk down into 3 areas with 3 take-home messages in each. How do we know what we know? And why should we care? What's happening in the body with aging at a biological level? Because when you can understand that, it makes it a little bit easier to know what to do. And then what action areas, what are the action areas to reset the biological age? And I'm going to share my ACT formula. So first of all, how do we know what we know? Well, the first place is from twin studies. Twin studies. And there have been studies that identical twins are exactly the same DNA. And they've been followed for years and years. And they find that when twins get to 40, 50, 60, that often their lives become very different. Their health is very different. And their biological age is different. So in lots of cases, in this case particularly here, you've got 2 women, same DNA, identical twins, 61, but one has a biological age that's 10 years younger than the other. So if it's not your genes that are causing the changes that you have when you age, what is it? And so the twin studies have shown us that it's your environment, it's the things that you do, your choices that you make. And so from the twin studies, what I have taken from this is that we can actually twin ourselves. And so what I mean is, if you think of yourself right now and add 20 years to how old you are, so I'm at 20 years, I'm 87, to my 87 self. My 87-year-old self has already been created. She's been created by everything I've done up until today. And if I keep doing the same thing, that's the person I'm going to be. But I could choose, and I do, to change something today, so that now I head off on a different trajectory. And then I create a younger, more healthy version of myself, my future self. I've twinned me, if you like. And we can, that starts off, and it's not a very big change here, but you can see that the change up here is huge. So you just need to start off with small changes, and you can head off on a different trajectory and create a new you. So the take-home message from twin studies is that you can twin yourself. The next area that we learned from is blue zones. The blue zones are areas in the world where there are a large proportion of people who live to 100 and beyond healthily. And traditionally there were 5 zones, Linda Loma. Loma Linda. Loma Linda. So there's so we've got Loma Linda. So initially there were 5, Loma Linda in California, in the Corea Peninsula, in Costa Rica, Sardinia in Italy, Ikaria in Greece, and Okinawa in Japan. And recently I think Singapore has been added. But I think what you can see is that these are very different cultures. They're not doing the same, they're not got the same activities, they're not eating the same food. And so the take-home message from this is that there's not one size fits all. And the final part of information comes from cohort studies where groups of people are followed up. We're looking at different variables like diet, exercise, and lifestyle, and they're followed over time to see about outcomes like health, longevity, and quality of life. And there have been studies where people have entered these cohorts at 40, 50, 60, 70. And so the take-home message is that it's never too late to start, because people as old as 70 have come into a cohort, changed something like their exercise, and had positive outcomes. So what we know and why should we care is that it gives us hope. We can twin ourselves. It's not one size fits all. You can find something that works for you, and it's never too late to start. So my social media feed is full of miracle molecules, miracle products, if you like, for healthy aging. It's just the way it happens. But the real miracle is our body. We have 37 trillion cells, and then I think on average there's 1 billion reactions per cell per second. There's a lot going on. We're building things, we're breaking it down, we're recycling, we've got waste disposal, we've got repair and maintenance, we've got surveillance, with energy production, homeostasis, which is maintaining, balancing, and all the time we've got coordination and communication between the cells. There's a lot of stuff happening. And some of those reactions, let's call them cellular rejuvenation mechanisms, are specifically and some of those pathways, let's call them longevity pathways, are specifically to keep our cells in a healthy state, working efficiently. Some of those are our cellular rejuvenation mechanisms, and we want those on. So if we remember that, let's just think about, let's just have a little look at some of the mechanisms that affect whether the cells are on or not, with those mechanisms, as cellular rejuvenation mechanisms are on. And this is also really so that you, when you're looking at longevity, you'll hear different terms. And so this is also to give you a familiarity with what the terminology is. So the first study is on epigenetics. So we know that it's not your genes per se that affect how you age, but it is your gene expression is important. So gene expression is sort of like, is the gene on or off? And actually, it's not just like a simple light switch. It's more like a dimmer switch. You can some genes turn up, the dimmer switch turns up as you get older, and some turn down. So this is a heat map with lots of different genes. Blue is a down-regulated gene, red is an up-regulated, and you can see that with time, there are some genes that change. Some are down-regulated when you're youthful, and they up-regulate with age. Melanin production, for example, which is why we get age spots. Some are upregulated when you're youthful, and they downregulate as you age. Collagen production, which is why you get wrinkles. So, but the key thing is that we can actually, if we introduce vitality codes, biohacks, or whatever, we change something, we can turn the dimmer switch back. So we turn our gene expression back towards how it looked in youth. And sometimes you'll hear people talking about the epigenetic clock. So the epigenetic clock is how the genes are looking. But the key message here I want you to take is that we can turn the dimmer switch back the other way. Whatever way it's gone with aging, we can turn it back the other way. The second mechanism I want to talk about is telomeres. So telomeres are the little caps at the end of the chromosomes. I don't have any, well, I have very few 67-year-old cells. I'm 67, but I don't really have 67-year-old cells. My skin cells turn over every 28 days. My red blood cells, 120 days. My liver cells 10 months, 10 to 18 months. So we've got cellular turnover all the time where the cells are dividing and creating new cells. So what's to stop that happening forever? Well, the telomeres stop that happening forever. Every time the cell divides, the telomere gets shorter. So here's a cell dividing, and here's a telomere getting a bit shorter, then getting shorter again. And when it gets to a particular shortness, the cells stop dividing. So the cells stop dividing and they die. And there's a process when the cells stop dividing before the, these cells that have stopped dividing are often called senescent cells. So you might hear that when we're talking about longevity. But the good news here is that we can increase the length of our telomeres. So there's an enzyme telomerase, and there are certain things that we can do that will increase our telomerase and therefore increase our telomere length. And even the way you think and where you choose to live can alter your telomere length. So there's a lot of things that we can do in a positive way for our telomeres. And finally, the mechanism I want to talk about is inflammation. So you'll know that inflammation is something that occurs in our body when we need to heal. For example, if I cut my arm, the cells that have been damaged send out a distress signal saying, help me, and the call in inflammatory cells, which heal up. However, when inflammation becomes chronic and it doesn't turn off and you get a chronic loop, that is not healthy for us, and that's strongly related to the signs of aging. And so inflammation, chronic inflammation, and aging is so closely related, they've created this portmanteau, this word inflammation. So remember those senescent cells that I talked about with the telomeres? Well, senescent cells, they sit there and they act as if they're injured, and they go, help me, and they set up an inflammatory response, and the inflammatory response creates more senescent cells, so you get a vicious cycle. And then we have free radicals. So free radical is a molecule that's unstable, and they're created sometimes in reactions in the body, and sometimes we have free radicals from our environment. But basically what happens is the free radical, once it's unstable, it wants to become stable. To become stable, it needs to take an electron, and it doesn't care where it takes it from. It will scavenge it from anywhere, and it will take it from healthy tissue. So an electron is grabbed from the healthy tissue. It's sort of like it's injured the healthy tissue. So then that injury sets up an inflammatory response. And so you get this, again, vicious cycle, because within the inflammatory response, you get free radicals created. And so that is sometimes talked about as oxidative stress. So free radicals, the free radical trying to become stable creates stress in the body, and it's called oxidative stress. Don't need to take too much notice of the thing. So what I would like to tell you to know from the biological mechanisms is we can turn the dimmer switch back, we can increase telomerase and lengthen our telomeres, and we can interrupt the vicious cycle of inflammation. And when I think of healthy aging, I like to think of it as an intricate dance. There are all of these things. This is just 3 biological mechanisms. There are many more. And they're all working, they're sort of not working by themselves in isolation. They're all working together. It's like a very complicated choreography creating a beautiful dance. And there are many, many things that you can do to switch on your cellular rejuvenation. But if you were learning a new dance, where would you start? You start with the very basic steps, and you start with your feet, and you're at half speed, and you learn where your feet go, and then you might speed it up to normal speed, or then you might add your hips, then you've got that. You might add your arms, and then like finally you might add the expressions and the little flourishes in the dance. So you start with the basics and you build a firm foundation, and then you can add on it. And so that's where I think we should start our healthy aging journey. And that's where my ACT formula comes in, because it's very much like, let's create a strong foundation. So my ACT formula is basically a think, feel, do formula. And we start with the A, which is attitude or mindset. There's a study from Stanford, from Becca Levy, who looked at attitudes towards aging in 50-year-olds. And then they followed these group of people up because of a cohort study. And they found that if you had a positive attitude towards aging in the 50s, it added 7.5 years to your life. And everything else was, taken into account. Just a change in attitude added years to your life. 7.5 years, that's huge. That's where you start. You don't start with a little supplement that might add a few months to your life. Start with your attitude that adds 7.5 years to your life. And then another person who's done a lot of work on mindset and aging is Professor Ellen Langer from Harvard, and she did the counterclockwise study. But there's one particular study I want to mention, which is called the chambermaid study, and they looked at people in the house. They wouldn't call them chambermaids now, probably. They're probably called household staff in hotels. And, they're looking at these mainly women who were very, very active. It was a very, physically demanding job, but they didn't really look healthy. And so they decided to study this group, and they got a number of women from 7 different hotels, and they split them into 2 groups. In one group, they just talked about, and first of all, they just examined these people's idea about their own fitness, and 2/3 of them didn't really think that they were very fit, and 1/3 of them didn't think they did anything at all from an exercise point of view. They had no physical activity. They did nothing from an exercise point of view. So one group, they just gave them the latest guidelines on what it was to be healthy. The US Surgeon General has guidelines. And then the second group, they gave them the guidelines, but then they sat down with them and went through each of the guidelines in terms of what they did in their everyday life. So they really pointed out to them, well, you do this, and that accounts for X and Y or whatever. And they just followed them over 4 weeks. And these women didn't do anything different other than their jobs over that 4 weeks. But at the end of the 4 weeks, the group who now believed that they were exercising, they had been told, well, when you do this vacuuming, that counts for X, whatever minutes. And this, when they knew they were exercising, when they were working, so their perception had changed. That's all that had changed. They had lost weight, they had lower blood pressure, and generally felt healthier and had a completely different idea of their health now. And that was just a change in perception. And Professor Langer did another study where she had people just listen to negative words about aging, so negative opinions and words. And after just 15 minutes, people were walking slower. They were acting older. So the key with attitude the key here is that your attitude can not only add years to your life, but it can add health and it can take it away. So what can you do from a practical point of view? So the first thing is reframe your thoughts. So anytime you find yourself having a negative thought, immediately reframe it. So, for example, you say, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. Well, you can reframe that by just adding yet. I can't do that yet. Or I choose not to do that. Or you're in a conversation and someone sort of says, oh, they look good for their age. Immediately it's like, oh, no, they look good. They look good. You take away the age, so you reframe your thoughts, and obviously you reframe the words. Secondly, surround yourself with people who are positive about aging. For example, the Pro-Age Alliance is a beautiful way of doing that, because all these women who are very proactively living life and defying age limits. You want to be surrounded by people with that attitude, not with people who are going to be negative and are going to actually affect the way your cells are listening. So, and just as your cells are listening to other people, they're also listening to yourself. And so I like to have an analogy of a factory. When I was young, in my holidays, I used to work in a factory. And it was my dad's factory. And so I have this analogy. So imagine that you've got all of these cells, those trillions of cells, and they're all doing their job, whatever job they've got, having all of those billions of reactions. There's a lot of stuff going on. And they're all trying to, help you. And you are the boss. And they're listening to you. How do you think they'll work more efficiently if you're always berating them and say, so hopeless, this is useless? Or do you think they're going to be more efficient if they feel gratitude? Say, well, thank you for being so amazing. Thank you for allowing me to walk. Thank you for allowing me to be so active today. So be grateful for yourselves. Let them know that it matters, the words that come in from other people and from yourself. And I have some free resources on my website. I have a mindset shift mini course, and also a gratitude to yourselves short meditation. So the C is for calm. We want to connect to our rejuvenation state. So we have we have an autonomic nervous system, which is sort of like the automatic nervous system behind the scenes that just runs things. And our autonomic nervous system has two branches. It has the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, which is all about taking action and keeping us safe, basically. And we've got our parasympathetic, which is our rest and digest, or as I like to say, rest, digest, and rejuvenate state. And the fight or flight state is literally to get us out of danger. And when the fight or flight state is on, our other state is off. So, because our fight or flight is all about getting us through, keeping us alive to get to the next birthday. It doesn't care how we actually look and feel, it just wants to get us there. As our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest, digest, and rejuvenate state, that's about our biological age, how we look and feel. But it can't do anything while we're in the stress state. And sadly, with today's way of living, we spend a lot longer in our stress state than we ought to. From an evolutionary point of view, that state was there to protect us, to get us away from the mountain lion who wanted to maul us. But nowadays, people are in that state when they're worried about making a meeting, they're late for a meeting or late for a deadline, or they're worried about how to pay a bill or what's going to happen yesterday, or they're fretting about something else. All of those put us in the stress state. And when we're in the stress state, we can't be in the rejuvenation state. So really, we need to be able to be calm and in our rejuvenation state. So we need tools to take us out of the stress state once we don't need it anymore. Sometimes we need it. Stress is inevitable in life. I'm not saying that you keep yourself away from stress, but you don't live there. As soon as you don't need that state anymore, you move into your calm state. And so you need tools to do that. So the first tool is be in the now. So this is mindfulness. And there are many, many techniques, meditations. I quite like, if I want to quickly get in the now, the five senses trick, which is basically just ask yourself questions. What are 5 things that I can see right now? What are 5 things that I can feel right now? What are 3, so 4 things? What are 3 things that I can hear? What are 2 things that I can smell? And what are 1 thing I can taste? You know, and the sort of, whether it's, you know, this, and it doesn't, the order probably doesn't really matter, but you do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I mean, taste, you can really only taste 1 thing, so have that as the 1, and smell maybe 2, but the order of the others, it doesn't really get worried about that, but you're just asking yourself and observing. And in that observer state, you bring yourself back into the now. The next one is breathe, and my program is infused with breath work. You know, breath is such an accessible way for us to connect with our calm state, connect with our cellular rejuvenation state. When we take a deep breath into the, you know, and engage the diaphragm, then we activate our vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is the principal nerve, is the parasympathetic nervous system. So breathing deeply into the belly, we just actually do it right now. So either keep your eyes open or closed, put your hand on your belly, take a deep breath in through your nose and feel your hand moving out as your belly expands, and then out through your mouth. Breathe in through your nose, expand your belly, and out through your mouth. And do it 1 more time. Feel the expansion in your body as you breathe in, and as you breathe out, feel the body relaxing and letting go. And that's just 3 little breaths. You know, that's a very, very easy breath work. I mean, breath work can be as complicated or as easy as you like, but that little breath would help bring you into the calm moment. And finally, a beat it mentality. I just like to have the beat it as to keep in line with my 3 Bs. So this comes from the original work that Elizabeth Blackburn did. She, I was going to say invented, but she discovered telomeres. And they were doing studies and found that if you know, obviously stress is a part of life, but how you think about stress is really key. So if you look at the stressful moment or as a challenge rather than a threat, then you have longer telomeres. And so I took from her work that when I'm faced with a challenge or an obstacle, the first thing I say is, I've got it. I've got this. I've got this, because it's giving me this, okay, I don't know how yet, but it's a challenge. I can overcome it. It's a challenge. I can overcome it, as opposed to, oh my gosh. So just a change in mentality can increase the length of your telomeres. And what I didn't mention at this, before I started talking about the ACT formula, is all of the things I'm talking about have got the ability to turn the dimmer switch back the other way, to increase the length of the telomeres, and to interrupt the inflammation. And the final part of my formula is T for tweak your lifestyle. We want transformation for sure, but we get it by tweaking. So many times, you know, what we're doing is we're creating healthy habits, and so many times people start to do something new and they fail and they go back. And one of the reasons is that they try to do something that's too far. So we want to, utilize all of the research and the studies about how you make habits stick. And one of the key ones is that you just make a small change. You tweak your lifestyle. So from wherever you are, we're all in different places. Wherever you are, you just look, okay, how can I tweak this? And there are 3 areas I just want to talk about today, which are key. So in my 12-week course, we do go through many more of these, but just to start, let me just talk about the first one, which is move more. go for a walk, lift something heavy, stand on one foot. So you notice that I mentioned 3 different things. I was mentioning movement. So we want to exercise our heart. Lift something heavy. This is muscles. We're exercising our muscles for strength. We have strong muscles. We have strong bones. And standing on one foot's about balance. And that's about balance and coordination is about having a healthy brain. So we want to exercise all 3. And wherever you are now, you can start. If you're already a gym bunny and you're in the gyms, 5 times a week, do you need to do more balance? Or do you need to do the calm walk? You can just do more. If you don't do anything, then just, exercising for 10 minutes a day makes a difference. Exercising 4 times for a minute and doing that during the day and doing that 4 times during the day makes a difference. So, and if you can't work out during the week, there's just no time, you just do it on the weekend, but just move more. And then we eat less. So we eat less calories. So a 12% reduction in the calories that we currently eat will make changes at a cellular level. 12% is basically you get your plate and you put it in half, and you put it in quarters, and then you halve the quarter and you just leave that much out. You've reduced your calories by 12%. Also, there's sugar. Sugar is very inflammatory. Small increases in sugar increase the inflammatory processes in the body. So you want it so sugar is very directly related to inflammation. Reducing sugar makes a big difference. And finally, just reduce processed foods generally. And if we're eating less of all those foods, then you can replace, the sugar and the processed foods with fruit and vegetables, colourful food. And finally, go outside. So go and watch a sunrise, walk in a forest, along the beach, plant a garden. Going outside is really, really healthy for healthy aging. So there are 9 things there, and you could choose any single one of them, and it will make a difference. And I'm sure that there's one that you could do today. So I don't know if you'd like to share what's been most helpful so far, or what you've taken from it so far in the comments. So studies have shown that a study from Harvard showed that women in their 50s who added 4 to 5 healthy habits increased their lifespan by 10 years. And not just any 10 years, 10 disease-free years, just by adding some healthy habits. And, we know that it costs money to be unwell. So adding disease-free years actually also saves money. I mean, imagine this, it's 10 years from now, you're waking up full of excitement and energy for the day ahead because, for what you've got planned. And you feel a degree of freedom that you get to choose how you spend your day. And you're confident that you're your best you. You're confident that you have claimed age as your superpower. And it's all because you chose today to change something, to add some healthy habits. Habits aren't created overnight, but they're not created at all if you don't start. And probably the best time to start was yesterday, but the next best time is today. And so to help and so what I have got my course that I mentioned, but really to help people get started, I have got a free ACT 5-day challenge starting next week, which is really just going to be actually let's get everything in place to get started, and also help people know whether they want to work further with me and do the 12-week course. But it's a great way to get started, and it's completely free. You just scan the code. So are there any questions? Thank you for joining. I would just like to leave you, whether you work with me or not in the future, I would just like to leave with you this message. Cellular rejuvenation doesn't need to be hard. Just make a 2% change in something that you're doing today. You can do it. You can do it your way, and you can start today. Just choose one thing. So if you want to join the ACT challenge, scan the code